Welcome back to Inside the Pastor Study Podcast. I'm Pastor Jeremy.
And I'm Pastor George.
And we're back with a new episode. Glad you joined us. We are a father and son pastoral team serving in a small church north of Boston, Massachusetts. Local church guys, love the local church, and we love sitting back and talking about ministry and talking about how the church functions within this crazy culture that we live in. And we're glad you're along for the ride. If you're new with us, here's some things you can expect. Well, I have no idea what you can expect. We're always a little bit different. Yeah, never. That's the thing, I guess. It's kind of what it's like to be in our study throughout the week. We are focused. We have jobs. We have that we're working on. We have tasks and events that we're trying to figure out. Like there are those regular rhythm things that you expect a pastor to be doing.
But we're both verbal processors.
Yeah, and so here you are with us as we kind of process some of the things that we're working on or learning or thinking through. Sometimes those have to do with sermon series or things going on in our culture. Sometimes they're just simple things like movie reviews or I think we just spent the last hour talking about World War II history before we even turned the mics on. So that's just kind of, that's a bit of what it's like. Yesterday our church celebrated your 10th anniversary.
Awesome.
Yeah, which was really fun. And had a meal afterward. My daughter was pretty excited because her slice of cake had your face on it.
Oh, yeah.
And we were sharing different things, and a number of people who spend any time in the church office at all kind of had similar observations about what it's like to be in the church office when you're in there. And it's a bit like the podcast. You get some random stuff and some pretty terrible puns.
Terrible puns.
And which, those are on a piece of paper. You can take them off by tearing them. Yeah. And so you can...
They didn't get that.
No. Yeah, I used to have those on my door.
I did,
thinking
yes.
back. Yeah. So, that's a bit of what you're in for. And we hope that that's encouraging and helpful, and that there's content in here among all of the rabbit trails that we end up on that would be helpful as you're considering your own personal faith and the way to share it with others. We always begin our episode by talking about a theological term of the week.
The theological term of the week.
And this week, that term is?
Arianism.
So we were mentioning, we're going to try and hit some of these. There have been a lot of controversies over the course of the history of the church.
Yes.
And we had a really long arc of episodes earlier on in our run to talk about how some certain denominations became their denominations. And a lot of these came out of controversies.
Always, yes.
But what we're going to hit are some of the banner controversies that have launched like really big movements or big pieces of our theology, right?
These are basically we're going to hit heresies, and most of the heresies deal with answering the question of who is Jesus.
Yeah,
because really that's what it all comes down to: who is Jesus? And you begin with those heresies very early. Arianism dates to about 250, 300 A.D. So you're not looking at a very old or long-standing church function. It is the first time that the church actually got together and said, is this good? Is this bad? What are we going to do with that? And Arianism was a theological heresy about Jesus that began very early. And there's lots of those. We're going to talk about a bunch of them in the next couple of weeks. But Arianism basically tries to answer the question, like I said, who is Jesus? And the Arian said that Jesus is a man in whom God dwelt.
Well, that makes him not much different than me.
Well, it's true. It's true. And part of the problem with Arianism is trying to deal with another doctrine, maybe another word of the day that we could deal with somewhere along the line, which is Gnosticism. Yeah. Which says, how do we know, or what do we know?
Right, because gnosis with a G is the word for knowledge, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so there's this idea that there's some sort of secret knowledge.
Right. Yeah. But the Gnostics said, one of the things that the Gnostics said was that anything that is flesh or real or touchable is evil. And anything that is non-touchable, the spiritual, that's good. So The
there's
Arian-
hints of that even into our own culture,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely. I run into great fundamentalists all the time who are just, whether they realize it or not, struggling with Gnosticism and their hatred of all that God has made good. So Arianism tries to deal with the question of how could God inhabit or participate or be in a physical form, because anything physical is evil.
Sure.
So their answer to that...
We've talked about this before, right? If depending on where you start as a base, can end you into some dangerous places, right?
Exactly.
So if you end on a faulty base, like the physical is bad and the spiritual is good, which isn't biblical, it's Greco-Roman.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Then you have to figure out what to do with a perfect Jesus.
Exactly. And therein lies the problem. And so you talk about Greco-Roman, you're actually talking about a doctrine, Arianism, that springs out of northern Turkey, southern Romania, Macedonia. So you have an area of the world that has been greatly influenced by Greek and Roman thought, and are struggling with this idea of physical is evil, spiritual is good. How do I make Jesus, who is physical, which is evil, how do I make him good?
Yeah.
Right? And so Arianism comes to the opinion that Jesus must have become God, but that he wasn't God. But he was.
Right.
Right? So Arianism tries to deal with that. So one of the things that Arianism will, for example, do, they will resort to the baptism of Jesus, where the Holy Spirit descends upon Jesus like a dove. That is the moment that Jesus becomes God. And then when Jesus dies on the cross and he says, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit," or commend my spirit, that's the moment where Jesus gives up being God and the physical Jesus dies. So, because you can't, that's the other thing, right? You can't have God dying.
Yeah. And then the other thing, but then the problem you run into is all those passages in the Gospels that happen after Jesus' resurrection.
Yeah.
Which go on to prove his physicality.
Yes. But there is one of those other things about Arianism, is that they'll struggle with the physicality of Jesus. They will, and I have even run into this in old-fashioned dispensational thought, of all places, which is probably another word.
It's another
we deal
definable
with.
term. Yeah.
But they used to take the concept of John 20, where Mary finds Jesus in the garden, thinking that he's the gardener, and using a very bad English translation, they say, when Jesus says, "Do not hold on to me because I have not ascended to my Father," there's actually an old dispensational thought that lends toward Arianism that says, oh, so Jesus hasn't fully congealed into what he's supposed to be, so that's why Mary isn't supposed to touch him.
Yeah, but it's not touch.
It's grasp and hold and keep, right?
Yeah.
That's the idea. So that's that Arian concept of I have to come up with some excuse for how Jesus can both be physical, which is evil, and spiritual, which is good.
So if you take the 1,000-foot view of this heresy, what you have is a person trying to reconcile their background in secular thought with their love for Jesus.
Absolutely, yeah.
And man, it's a good thing we never see that today, huh?
Right, isn't it? There's a joke.
Yeah.
Sarcasm. The sarcasm meter just peaked for those of you who aren't.
And I get
watching
it.
our
Like,
faces.
nobody wants to be called a heretic, and I don't necessarily want to levy that term against anyone. But heresies begin when we start doing that.
Yes.
When we start making concessions or explanations around what Scripture says because of our cultural background. And we have to be wise about where we build our theological foundation. Is it based on Scripture, or is it based on our culture? And if we base our theology on our culture, then we're going to run into heresy.
Exactly. So this heresy was faced down at the Council of Nicaea in 330 A.D. The church had just become legitimate and was now legally tolerated and able to function. And so what the church did was they gathered all of the bishops of the major churches. So when you say bishop, you're really just saying pastor. So they gathered all of the major bishops from all of the big churches, and they gathered in a community to discuss the issue. And on one side is the leader of Arianism. He's a guy whose name is Arius. Sure. And Arius's followers. And then on the other side is a man named Athanasius. And he has his folks, and they discuss the issue. They deal with the issue from a biblical perspective. They try to go through all of the ins and outs of the issue. Very similar to the Jerusalem Council in Acts 15. They really attempted to...
That was their model, right?
That was their model,
yeah.
Exactly. And in the end, the agreement that they come to is that Arius is wrong. And just from a scriptural perspective, they determine that Arius is wrong. Now, there is a church split. So
a schism?
A schism, yes.
Another theological term.
Yeah. So there's a splinter group of people who follow Arianism, and that part of the church is, they're ostracized. They're considered heretics, but they become what's known as Arian Catholics, and you can still find some of those people in Bulgaria and Romania and, some of that area today. And then Arianism made a major rebirth in the writings of a man from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, whose last name was Russell. And the Russellites tried to pursue the concept of, is Jesus God? And what they came up with was that Jesus is just God-filled. And everything that you've read about Jesus is wrong because preachers have been telling you what it means. And Russell supposedly did his own translation of the Bible that tried to remove that whole concept that Jesus was God. Spent a great deal of time on that. Tried to draw a bright line distinction between Jesus and the God who he called Jehovah. And Russell's followers eventually became known as Jehovah's Witnesses. So when those Jehovah's Witnesses come to your door, they are actually following a 3rd century or 4th century heresy that says that Jesus isn't God, but that Jesus becomes God-filled.
Yeah. Off of a term that we've mistranslated from the Hebrew.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Actually, in my Sunday school class yesterday, we got into a major rabbit trail on the whole concept of the name Jehovah.
The Tetragrammaton.
Right.
4 letters. You get 4 letters. We made Jehovah out of it. It might be Yahweh. It might be something else that we don't even know.
Yeah, and that's because Hebrew doesn't have any consonants. It just has vowels.
I thought you were...
Excuse me.
There we go.
I'm sorry.
We're
See,
here.
I'd be in trouble in Wheel of Fortune. See?
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah. I'd like to buy a consonant, please.
Sure.
Yeah.
You can get the letter A.
Yes. So, so Hebrew just has consonants. They have 22 consonants. They have no vowels. And what you have to do is you have to supply the vowels. And later on in time, because there was a concern about people not having a background in knowing the vowels, the Hebrew text began putting the vowels in and around, but not into the actual text.
Yeah, they're just like above or below.
Right.
Yeah.
But you couldn't actually say the name of God, which is basically a YHWH. You couldn't say his name. So what they did was to make sure that everybody knew that they were coming to the name of Yahweh. What they did was they took the vowels for the letter or for the word Lord, and they put those vowels around the noun so that you would look at it and you would see Yahweh, but you would read Adonai
Right.
so that you wouldn't get that mixed up.
Right.
So consequently, you read the name Yahweh with the vowels for Adonai, and you put it all together, and it actually looks a lot like Yehovah or Jehovah. But
There you
it is not a Hebrew word. So has too many syllables for one thing.
It's true.
So
It's true. Well, yeah, lots of theological terms of the week.
Oh, way too many. But we'll talk about it. We'll talk about some more of these Jesus heresies.
Cool.
As time goes on.
Sounds great.
The theological term of the week.
Well, there you go. That was today's theological term of the week. You have to excuse us. We're going to do our best. We both have weird colds today, but
we do.
We're going to try. We're going to try our best. And good news, we're not going to be in the car with you, so you're not going to catch it. So we're going to continue on in our conversation. This one has been brewing for us over the last couple of weeks, this conversation. And I've been working through it mentally and thought maybe this would make an interesting episode to discuss. But the conversation is around Christian colleges.
Yeah.
And what is the role of Christian college? What should you expect from a Christian college if you're going there or if you're sending your kids there? And I don't know, what's their place? Like, what is their place in the kingdom? Are they necessary or not? Are they things that you should value as a family, or is there something else that would be more important? There's just a lot around this. So I'm a product of a Christian college, which makes sense.
So am I.
Yeah. I guess for a lot of people that makes sense because I went into pastoral ministry, and for a lot of people, the role of a Christian college is really just if you're pursuing ministry. But if you're pursuing some other career, then why go to a Christian college? I've encountered that a bit. So yeah, we'll begin the conversation there. But what are your thoughts on this?
So I think that you have to begin here with the whole concept of what college is. I am very much pro Christian college, and I watch parents who are just pro college, who their children become classic overachievers. I went to a college prep school, so I grew up in this. I went to high school in this environment where, from the time we were freshmen, we knew that you had to not just take the SAT, but you had to take and pass at least 2 advanced placement classes.
Sure.
Plus, you had to take these other subcategory tests that if you didn't take those and pass them, you were not going to get into your career mode at the Ivy League college that you chose to go to. Now, I went to college. I went to high school, folks, I went to high school with 2 people in my graduating class who got perfect scores on the SATs. Mm-hmm. And that was back in the days when it was a 1600 rack, so it was 800, and they got perfect scores on their SATs. And they were struggling with Harvard, Yale, and had a lot of Dartmouth friends. I had a lot of Colgate friends.
And then the rest settled and went to Princeton?
Yeah, the rest settled and went to Princeton, which, that was kind of going to be my direction because I was not the overachiever. I was kind of I was just going to go along to get along.
Yeah.
So there are those who see college as this is my career path.
Right. And if I don't start correctly, I'll never get to where I need to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. There are those who see college as, quite honestly, our culture's turned college into
4 years of do whatever
frivolity.
you want. Yeah, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Before you have to settle down and work for a living.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like the old Amish concept of going out and sowing your wild oats.
Yeah.
So I have just always been amazed by parents who It's
expensive.
like, send their kid to some college. Like there's a college in, I'm sure that they'll find this libelous, but there's like the number one party school in the United States is Flagler State University in Florida. Now, Flagler State University is just north of Daytona Beach. And if you come upon somebody who is a graduate of Flagler State,
Maybe don't hire them.
please don't hire them, because they actually, all they did was they went to college for 4 years of drunkenness and orgies and getting, how well can you do on beer pong?
Yeah.
And I'm just amazed that there are parents out there who will say, oh, I want to make sure that my child has a school that has a good party life. Are you kidding me? So I think that we need to begin by talking about, what the purpose of college is. And I think before we get to talking about Christian colleges, I think we have to understand that the purpose of college is to teach somebody how to think. And once you get that foundation of, I'm going to college to learn how to think, then you'll be more willing to either pursue a Christian college or understand what it is you're getting into.
And there's an important distinction here between how to think and what to think.
And what to think, right? So a lot of colleges have devolved into indoctrination programs. It's kind of like a what to think.
Yeah, so we're talking about like developing the skill set of taking in information, processing it, and coming to a conclusion.
Yeah. So like parents, if your child comes home from college and tells you that they've decided to switch their major to anything that ends in the word studies, okay, what they're telling you is that they have given up on learning. They've now just decided to be taught what it is that they're supposed to think and view in the world, because most of those studies program exist only to be indoctrination programs. They have no value in the workplace, and they really have very little value in the process of learning how to think. So
it's kind of like that. We're stepping on my toes today. I can feel it already. So,
yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of like that bailout thing where like I've already committed to this and I've been taught my whole life that I have to finish what I started.
Yeah.
But I probably shouldn't be here.
Yes. Yeah.
But I still have to get a degree or else I can't get into the workplace. And so I'm going to devolve into this space if I can get a degree in something so that I can get a job and work.
Yes.
Right.
And I think that there's value. There's value to going to college for a year or two and not getting a degree.
Sure.
Because I would hope.
Well, then you get a chance to test whether or not that's for you.
Exactly. And you're also pursuing this concept of, am I willing to learn how to think? So if you're doing the right stuff, if you're taking the right classes, you should be learning how to think so that when you become a welder, plumber, HVAC installer, and make more than the average college student without all of the debt, you know how to think and have a conversation with people.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And maybe you've snagged a couple good classes on managing your business, and that's going to be an even greater asset to your future.
Right. So here's the thing. Okay, so if we're beginning with this premise that going to college is about learning how to think, then I want to be in a place where people are going to begin with the same foundations and how to think as my Christian doctrine and principles.
Yeah.
So there's argument number one for a Christian college.
And this is, for me, I grew up in this kind of the hybrid. I think when we were really young, we were in Christian school, but most of my schooling was in the public school system. And I'm okay with that, and I was okay with it even with my own kids. They're currently in a Christian school, but they were in a public school not long ago, and I valued that too. But I place the priority of Christian college way higher.
Yes.
Than I do even like Christian middle school or Christian high school.
Yes.
Again, my kids are currently in a Christian school, so there's still there's obvious value in that too. But if I can only pick one, then I'm going to send them to a Christian college when they're not in my house.
Yes, you are.
And I'm going to, while they're in my house, I'm going to correct whatever they're pulling out of their public school system, education.
Right, because starting point is important.
Yeah, and this other thing that's just in development, like I've talked about this a bit, like when you're an adolescent, your brain breaks. And that's why junior hires are such an interesting breed of human. And it's just like physiologically, your brain kind of the hemisphere, the communication between the hemispheres gets broken down and has to rebuild. And that's why you get like these teenagers who will start testing boundaries and start, thinking they're moving out of concrete thought and into more abstract thought. So that's just this process of being a teenager. And so by the time you're moving into the age of a college freshman, your brain is remolded and now kind of at this space where it's ready to start processing things and evaluating things and thinking. Right. So that's why, like, while the kids are going through this process of adolescence and being a teenager, I want them in my house, and I'm going to kind of work through all of this, potential mess and challenge of working with teens. But now that they're back and ready to think, and they can be trusted on their own to learn how to think and self-motivate, then I'm really interested in them starting with this basis of this same faith, this shared faith.
Right. And here's another thing that comes up with this, and this goes into the why Christian college thing. I know of a lot of wonderful Christian people who are also amazingly focused on being good stewards, otherwise known as being thrifty, cheap. College education is not cheap.
No.
It is pricey. It's very expensive. There's a whole political reason for that, which is kind of interesting to have a conversation on. But basically, that college educations are outrageously expensive. They actually have gone up. I think I read somewhere that college prices have inflated at a rate of 294%, where everything else has basically gone up by 100%.
Yeah.
So way out of line. So I know of a lot of parents who say, well, I'm going to have my child go to the local community college and get their general education credits because they're cheap, they're free.
Yeah.
My son or daughter did really well in high school, and they can go for free to the local,
to the state school,
to the state community college, and get those, and then they can make some decisions on what they want to do and go to college for their other degrees. Awful decision. Awful decision. Awful decision because the purpose for going to college is to learn how to think. And most community colleges are filled with individuals who will teach your kids what to think. And they are not going to teach your kids to think biblically.
No.
So here's the deal. Can I teach U.S. history from a biblical perspective that is realistic and is genuine? Or can I teach U.S. history from a dogma that denies Jesus?
I think the answer is yes to both, right?
Yes. But which do you want your kid to learn? Do you want your child to learn that God was actively involved in the United States and its development? Or do you want your kid to learn that, we're all in a godless environment and this is who we are? I have no idea how you want to address that, but you might think your child is good enough to learn those things on their own, but I don't know. I would rather have them in that controlled environment.
Yeah, it is. This is it's a challenging conversation because you look through your local church and you see a number of people who come from a lot of different backgrounds, right? You have people who went through state colleges, got heavily involved in the Christian organization within that state college, came out passionately following Jesus. And you're like, okay, well then that can also happen for my kid. Yeah, it could. Sure.
It could. But you know what? Here's the other side. Here, because we're talking about community colleges and free.
Yeah.
Guess what? You're not really going to find Young Life or Campus Crusade. They're not Campus Crusade anymore. Crew. You're not going to find them at your local community college.
Yeah, no, you still have to go to a major state
You
school.
still have to go to a major state school to get those. So,
And you're also not going to find Robin Williams at your local community college.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah. I think you're going to probably get what you're paying for.
Yeah, or Matt Damon.
Yeah, I mean, he might be there.
Yeah, he might be. Yeah.
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 It might be,
Yeah.
sometimes it's worth spending.
Sure.
But again, that's a whole other topic probably, the expense of college. Like, let's say I have
Two girls?
Yeah, I do. So let's say one of my girls, she's hitting junior year of high school, senior year of high school, and she has no idea what she wants to be when she grows up, right? And so as a parent who is going to end up being very involved in the financial making decision of her college career, I understand the temptation of why would I pay whatever it's going to be by the time she gets there? Why would I pay $40,000 a year for her to not know what she wants to do? I will save the money and let her check off some gen eds for free,
Right.
while she kind of figures out what she wants to do. But there is this danger, right? While she's checking off those free gen eds, is she actually learning anything that's going to be helpful for her future?
Right.
Is she going to end up
She's learning baseline stuff. And that baseline stuff may actually
may not set her up for the future?
It may not set her up for the future that she wants. So here's another side of that, okay? So 34%, at least what's what the number used to be. 34% of college freshmen enter into college not having a declared major. In other words, they have no idea what they want to be when they grow up.
Yeah. And probably of the remaining, 66%, 60% change their major by the time they graduate.
Sure, at least once.
Yeah.
Yeah. So very few people, very few college freshmen walk in the door and say, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up.
Right.
I had a cousin who was brilliant, absolutely brilliant in science. Went to a sub Ivy. Got into chemical biology, and realized that there was absolutely no way he wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah.
And changed his major.
Yeah.
Today he runs a financial company in Toronto. So, is he a doctor? No, but he doesn't have doctor's hours either. So
Probably worse.
So yeah, I mean it's so the bottom line is your child does not have to know what they want to be when they grow up, when they go to college, but what the college that they go to may affect what they are when they grow up.
Yeah. And I think it absolutely does. Not may, I think it does. And the environment they end up in is going to have a huge influence on where they decide to go. And who they're around in that environment is going to have a major influence on where they decide to go with their life.
Absolutely.
And this was, I think one of the most refreshing moments in my entire life, like just moving and powerful moments, was something very, very simple. I walked into my fundamentals of speech class, first day of school, and as a freshman in college. And before we got rolling, the professor asked us how he could pray for us, and he opened the class in prayer. And coming through the public school system, I was like, I am all over this.
Yeah.
I am hungry for this. Oh my goodness. Even in a speech class, I can learn about how my Jesus can have an impact on my life.
Yeah.
And I can be equipped in just these simple things like, biology or speech or compositional writing or American History 1 or whatever those gen eds that you would send your kids through. Like, oh, wow. No, all of this matters.
Yes. Yes.
All of this matters for the kingdom. And that's kind of, this is to transition this thing for a little bit, to what I've been processing on this whole topic. My concern is we're raising, I work with teens. I've been doing this for 20 years now, working with teens. And my concern as I watch teens move out of teendom and into the world is that as parents, we're trying to set our kids up to be successful people. But we really should be working hard to set our teens up to be successful Christians.
Yes. Totally different.
And
yeah.
I know the heart, because now as a dad, I know that heart. I want, like, whenever my daughter talks about, my daughters talk about different careers they want when they grow up, I'm in the process of steering those conversations a little bit right now, right? Like maybe you can be a hairdresser on the side, and hairdressing is great. I have a niece who does that as a career, and she's starting her own business with that soon. Great. Right. But also, like, hey, you might be, have you considered these other options? Like, we all do that as parents, right? We want like certain things for our kids because we're around them and we know them better than they know themselves for quite a while, in their life. And so we want to steer them in places where we know that they'll flourish. And at the same time, for a lot of parents, we sell our kids short because we try to steer them to good careers, but we don't try to steer them toward being faithful followers of Jesus first.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then they're just checking off these things, and then they just become, really kind paralegals and really wonderful office workers and really helpful church going eventually when they have kids in their 30s, people who are dental hygienists or whatever. Like we send them off to these places with no sense of purpose and mission. No. And what we should be doing as Christian parents, as we're equipping our kids, is saying, hey, you love Jesus. Like your life is transformed by Jesus. Jesus has been part of your story since when you got saved, and I was there, and we prayed this prayer when you were 5 or 6 or 7, or you went to a youth ministry camp, and Jesus is part of your life and a core piece of your life. How are you going to serve Jesus in this life?
Yes.
And then, based on who you're designed to be, a person who loves and serves Jesus, and then taking in these skills and these interests that you've come up with over the course of being in high school or even middle school, how can we leverage those skills and interests for the kingdom of God? Can you be a person who's in business acquisitions?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who loves Jesus and wants to make sure that in the process of turning little companies into big companies, you're doing this for the kingdom of God somehow.
Yeah.
How can you be a person who loves the process of accounting and the detail and all of that, but first and foremost loves Jesus? How can you leverage that ability that you have to see numbers and, to make balance sheets balance? How can you serve the kingdom with that?
Yeah.
Right. And we just sell our kids short because we try and get them into good careers. And if your goal as a parent is to just get your kid into a good career, send them to the most cost-effective university that is going to give them the best visibility in the workplace.
Yes.
If that is the only thing you're looking for,
yep.
Send them to the cheapest university with the biggest alumni exposure.
Yes. It's the Malcolm Gladwell concept.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Don't send them to Brown if they're going to flounder. Send them to Penn State.
Penn State.
Or, or we're here, send them to UMass.
Yeah.
And then, let them, big alumni network, they're going to do well.
Yes. Yeah.
But we're called to more than that.
Yeah. So I'll put this into an illustration. Many years ago, I was contemplating getting my school bus driver's license. My father-in-law, mother-in-law, they ran school buses. They owned school buses, and they contracted them out to the local school district, and they were always looking for bus drivers. So they were going to teach me how to drive a bus. So one of the most interesting and important pieces of information I got for my father-in-law, the farmer, one day in this 45-foot long, big yellow bus as we're driving down the road. He said, "Where your nose goes, the rest of the bus will follow." It just one of the most amazing pieces of information. It's like, where your nose goes, the rest of the bus will follow. And it just is the idea. And I use this all the time because to get into my garage requires kind of an unusual angle because of the way the driveway is lined up. And you can do like 3 or 4 backings and forwards to get the car straight in the garage.
Yeah.
But every time I come into it, I just say, well, where my nose goes, the rest of this car is going to follow. So if I put my nose in and I follow my nose, it's just going to, the car will just follow me right into the garage. And I can usually come down my driveway, do this 180-degree turn, and go right into the garage without
No dents,
no damage. And one swoop.
Yeah.
I very rarely put the vehicle in reverse because where your nose goes, the rest of the bus will follow.
Yeah.
So you think about that with your child. Where their nose goes, where you direct them, the rest of their life is going to follow. If I direct my child to be a follower of Jesus and to invest their lives in Jesus, then everything else about them, particularly if I'm using this Christian college concept, everything else about them is going to follow right through there.
Yeah.
You can even send your child to a Christian college that doesn't have their major. And quite honestly, most of the stuff these days, most of the career-driven stuff these days, you need a master's degree anyway.
Yeah, for the specialty stuff, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't.
For tons of stuff. Just to stand out in your field, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be a physical therapist. Well, you need a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in that too.
Yeah.
Or you're going to be. I'm going to be a nurse. Well, you need a bachelor's degree, and it'd be helpful if you had a master's. Kind of. It's crazy how these things go. Look, put your child into a Christian college. Let them get a good bachelor's degree with an emphasis in their general field. Mm-hmm. Right. Most Christian colleges these days have nursing programs. In fact, some of them have some of the most competitive nursing programs.
Yeah, and this is a good distinction, right? Because it's important to kind of speak to a false assumption that our parents have, right? Christian college is not just for pastors and missionaries and teachers, right?
I had this out with my mother when I was going to Christian college.
Yeah. And there are those Christian colleges that specialize in those things.
Right.
But goodness, there are elite Christian colleges out there that are very strenuous, that will turn out leaders in their fields, and with hundreds of different major possibilities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We look in. I've often talked like there's a Christian Ivy League, just like there's a secular one.
Yes, there is.
And if you go into any of those handful of schools, you're going to come out well equipped to do a very good job in the career field that you pursue. I remember I talked to somebody who was worked for. It was either Honda or Cat Diesel, because both were in like the Midwest where we went to college. And they were like a hiring manager, and they talked about how they had found, they had hired one person from the college I went to, and once they hired that one person, they were so impressed that they made sure they were at every single career day from then on out. And if they came out of that program that I went to, that at our college, if they were able to handle that program, they were going to make great employees.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I remember having that conversation with somebody from one of those big companies. And the person who was running those career fairs was a friend, and he said, "Yeah, like the statistics bear it out. If somebody hires one person from our university, they're going to hire a second." Right.
We have a son that is an accountant in Indiana, and Midwest, right? Actually, Indianapolis. So he's not far from Bloomington, not far from the University of Indiana, not far from Ohio State.
Yep.
Really, it's only it's a 3-hour drive, I think, to Indianapolis.
Not far from Notre Dame.
Not far from Notre Dame. Every firm that he has worked in Indianapolis, and Indianapolis is kind of like a secondary hub of accounting agencies, accounting firms, which is pretty interesting. Every firm that he has worked with other accountants from his Christian college. And as soon as he mentions where he's gone to school, it's an open door of opportunity.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, Christian colleges are not, they're not just teaching Bible classes.
Right. Like the president of Cedarville, where I went, when I was there, he was no longer the president, but he had this statement that has always stuck with me. He said that Christians should be the best in their field.
Yes.
And that was kind of his driving, focus behind how he organized, the
Has
university.
excellence stamped all over it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. And so, because the idea was listen, you not only are you going to have the same education or better than anybody else you're competing with, but you have the Holy Spirit in you. Therefore, the Christian will always be better at the job than an equally educated non-believer.
Yes.
And I love that. It was a powerful statement, and I think it bears out. Now there are these different tiers of Christian university, and there are tons of Christian universities in the United States that are worth looking into. And there is a bit of a minefield, and it gets difficult. It's good to have some conversations around that. And I'm not gonna take the rest of our podcast to tell you which ones to look at and which ones to not look at. But I would say it's worth chatting with people as you're looking at Christian universities to learn what that university's heartbeat is.
Yes.
Because I would say that there are a dozen great Christian colleges in the United States.
Yes.
And, across the board,
It'd be the first and second tier.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right? There's that Ivy League tier, and then there's the rigorous state school tier.
The little Ivies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those, they're out there. You could have the massive campus experience of a Liberty. You could have the small campus experience of
Summit
University. Yeah. So those exist, but there's a dozen great Christian colleges that are worth looking into.
Yes.
And there are also a lot of Christian colleges I would rather send my kid to a state school over.
That's true.
And,
me too.
And so it's worth having this conversation with a pastor or a friend who's kind of gone through some of this research, or visiting and asking some pointed questions.
Yeah. Can I hit one more?
Yeah.
One more reason to go to Christian college.
Sure.
I call this the Genesis 24 principle.
Okay.
And that is that our kids grow up in a very, now I'm going to use another word. Our kids grow up in a very parochial world. Their concept of Christianity is your youth group. So the only other Christian guys and girls that your son or daughter know have been in their Sunday school class since they were 3. Mm-hmm. And it's like dating their sister, and it's very limited. They've had very limited experience, very limited exposure. Maybe they've gone to a camp or two, you just came back from a winter camp at Berea.
Yeah.
That's awesome. They get to see that there are other Christian kids out there. That's a great thing. But here's the deal. You go to a Christian college, and you are going to a Petri dish of Christian students from around the world. They're going to test you because you may think that you're a super Christian. And suddenly you're dropped into this world where the fish tank is suddenly bigger, right? I remember when I went to Christian college, I thought I could sing really well, right? I was in my high school. I sang in high school. I showed up at my Christian college, and I tried out for the school choir and didn't even get a second look. I tried out for musical traveling teams, And there were so many people better than me to do that that they weren't interested.
Yeah.
Right? Great. It's kind of like going on American Idol, you know? You're going to get challenged by other Christians, right? But then there's this Genesis 24 principle, and that is, remember Genesis 24, Abraham calls in his servant, and he makes him swear to him. He says, do not find a wife for my son Isaac from among these Canaanites. Go back and find somebody from my own family, in this case, to be the peace and the joy for my son. And I think, I hate to say this, the old, go and get an MRS degree at a Christian college. But going to a Christian college will expose your son or daughter to far more wonderful people that they may see as a future spouse that will bless them and encourage them. Do Christian marriages fail? Sure. Do Christian college marriages fail? All of the time.
Yeah.
But why not put your child into a place where they're not picking from the world for their spouse?
Yeah.
Put them in a place where they're going to interact with other believers and make a pick from a better pool.
Sure. Yeah, it's like the appendix reason, right? For going, in addition to all these really wonderful reasons, there's this other benefit here that's worth considering for sure. And just being around, I think, I mentioned, the prayer in class was such a transformative thing for me. And the classes I went through were powerful. And this is another reason, just as an aside, right? At least at Cedarville, you came out with a minor in Bible. And the idea there was that anybody who graduates with a degree from Cedarville isn't capable of just serving in their church. They're capable of leading a ministry.
Yeah, because also they know how to think.
Right. They know how to think. They have enough theological education that they could, they don't even, they're not just the person serving, they're the person running a ministry. So anybody who comes out of Cedarville, and a lot of these Christian universities with a Bible minor, they should be equipped to not just serve in your church, but to be trusted with leadership.
Yes.
So that's an aside thing. But the thing that was so moving for me in this environment, in addition to all those things, were the conversations with other believers that happened throughout my college career, right? It's the late night conversations. We look back on college with fondness, right? It was
yes.
Those friendships, those late night conversations you have in your hall, and we all get that out of the college experience. And so for me, though having a huge chunk of those conversations centered around the cross and around Jesus and around how we held him in common and how he shaped us and changed us, and going into thoughts that were challenging and transformative, those are all things that shaped me. I am who I am because of the believing friends I had in college. And it's just all of these important steps. And so, I guess the bottom line here, friends, as you're listening to this, don't write off Christian college.
Please don't.
Don't look at it as a lesser option for your kid. I think that the statistics bear out. If you send your kid off to a rigorous Christian university that does place Jesus first, they're going to do just fine in their career. They may even do better.
Better, yeah.
I would submit that they would do better. So don't be concerned about their career. Be concerned about how they're impacting the kingdom.
Yeah.
And give good Christian universities a chance.
Yes.
In this process of trying to decide, or working with your kids as they try to decide where to go.
Yeah.
And make that investment in their future. And I think
investment, it's worth every penny.
Yeah.
Believe me, it's worth every penny.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So something to consider. You may have some pushback on this because I felt like, we tend to have some of these conversations that step on toes, and I'm pretty sure this one does. But feel free to push back on that. And we love that. We love this conversation. We love to have all kinds of conversations. We like pushback and disagreement. We love you, as pastors, right? We care about how you think and what you think, and we like interacting with that. So if you disagree or if you agree, shoot us an email, podcast@marshcorner.com, or reach out to us in some other way, and we'll have that conversation. But again, Christian colleges, I believe they're worth it. Give them a thought. If you're curious about my top 12, my list of a dozen universities to consider, you can reach out to me, jstephens@marshcorner.com. And I'd happily steer you toward the websites of a few good ones, not just Cedarville, but you should look at that one too.
You should first.
Well, thanks for joining us today. We hope that this has kind of primed your thinking a little bit, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye now. You have been listening to Inside the Pastor Study podcast with Pastors George and Jeremy Stevens. Artwork by Caitlin Gallagher, music by Sam Demetrius, and engineering help from Ashley Gallagher. To find out more about us, head to marshcorner.com.